So, have you ever stopped and wondered what really holds the internet together? In this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain on HTML, which is the fundamental language that gives every single page on the web its structure.
All right, so take a look at this. It looks kind of cryptic, right? Just a simple line of text.
What on earth does that have in common with this? A full-blown, polished website? Well, the answer is literally everything. That one little line of code, that's the DNA. It's the absolute basic building block for every single website you have ever used. So how does that work? The best way to think about it is like this. HTML is the skeleton of a web page. It's the bare bones, the essential structure that everything else gets attached. Okay, so let's actually break down what that even means. HTML. It stands for Hypertext Markup Language. The hypertext part, that's all about the links, the things that connect web pages together to create, well, the web. Now, the markup part, this is the really key bit for us right now. It's how we take plain old text and give it structure. And language, that just means it's the standard language that every web browser, whether it's Chrome, Firefox, or Safari, understands perfectly. And this right here is a perfect example of what I mean by markup. Over on the left, you've just got raw text, taco shop menu. But on the right, we've wrapped that text in what we call tags. See that H1? That tells the browser, hey, this is a top-level heading. And the P? That means this is a paragraph. We're not changing the words themselves, we're just annotating them. We're giving the browser instructions on what this text is supposed to be. Okay, so we have these tags. How do they all fit together on an actual page? Well, it's pretty cool, actually. Every single HTML document has the same basic anatomy. You can think of it kind of like a book, right? A book has some info on the cover, maybe a title page, and then it has the actual story inside. So every HTML page is split into two big sections. First, you've got the head. This is like the brains of the whole operation. It holds all this behind-the-scenes info just for the browser. Stuff like the little page title you see up in the browser tab. You don't actually see any of this on the page itself. And then you've got the body. And as you can guess, this is where all the stuff you do see lives. The text, the images, the videos, the whole shebang. And look at how this is structured. You see how these elements are nested inside each other? It all starts with one giant HTML tag that acts as a container for everything. And then, tucked inside that, you have the head and the body. It creates this really neat, logical, tree-like structure. It's super important because it's how the browser makes sense of it all. So this is where the magic happens. How do we get from this simple text file to the actual content that we see and interact with on a website every day? It's actually way simpler than you might think. So inside our body tag, remember that's the visible part, we just put an H1 tag to say, here's our main heading, and a P tag to say, and here's a paragraph. And bam! That's the result. The browser reads those tags and does exactly what it's told. Hello World becomes this nice, big heading, and the other text shows up as a normal paragraph. And that right there is the fundamental cycle of web development. You write the code, you save the file, and you look at the result in your browser. It's that simple. But here's something that's super, super important to get. HTML isn't just about making things look a certain way, it's about giving them meaning. And there's a word for this, semantics. It's a huge concept. Check this out. You could just make some text bold, right? That's just a visual change. It looks strong. But if you wrap that same text in a strong tag, you're doing something way more powerful. You're telling the browser and search engines like Google and even screen readers that this text isn't just styled to look important, it genuinely is important. It has real weight. And that's the key takeaway here. When we use tags like H1 for the main topic, and then maybe an H2 for a subtopic, we're building a meaningful outline for our document. We're not just, splashing paint on a canvas. We're building a logical, accessible structure that machines can actually understand. That's huge for things like search results and accessibility. Okay, so remember way back when we talked about hypertext? Let's circle back to that, because this is the magic that turns a bunch of separate files into the interconnected World Wide Web. These connections, or hyperlinks, are made with a simple anchor tag. That's the A tag. And the most important piece of it is that href attribute. It just stands for hypertext reference, which is a fancy way of saying the destination address. It's where you tell the browser, hey, when someone clicks this, go here. And creating a link is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Seriously. First, you start with that anchor tag. Second, you add the href attribute to point to where you want it to go. And third, you put the clickable text right in the middle. And that's it. You've just created a link. That is the absolute core of how we navigate the web. Okay, so let's put it all together. With just these super simple building blocks, we're talking headings, paragraphs, and links, we can actually start building something real, something much more complex. You remember where we started, right? With our little Hello World page. Just one heading, one paragraph. Super simple, but hey, it was a start. And now, look at this. By taking those exact same ideas, headings, paragraphs, lists, and links, and just applying them over and over, you can build this, a complete multi-page website. You scale up from that one simple page to a full project. All of this is built on that same simple skeleton of HTML. So, okay, we've established that HTML is the skeleton, right? It provides all the structure. But that leaves a pretty big question. What gives a website its skin? You know, its style, the colors, the fonts. And what about its brains, the part that makes it interactive? Well, that's a story for another time. Thanks so much for watching.